Hey friends, welcome back to my channel. In today's video, I would like to show how you can dynamically update your Shopify store from an external source. Let me quickly show you what I mean. I have just my simple demo Shopify store here and with the ordinary product page. What I would like to show you is I have set up a small campaign table in Baserow where I can just go here and upload an image for my marketing campaign. And when I go back to my Shopify store, I can just hit refresh and you can see that the image I just uploaded to Baserow has been automatically injected into my Shopify store. So just to show this again, I can just delete this one here and upload another one. And now I can just refresh my page and you can see this has also been updated. What we will be building today is a simple n8n workflow. We will start with a webhook node, which we will call from Baserow and send data to. Then we have a set node here to define some variables, an if node that helps us define some rules on how to process our data, a GraphQL node to upload our images to our Shopify media files, and an HTTP request node to inject a custom liquid file into our Shopify theme. So let's get started with this. Before we can build the workflow, we need to make some small changes to our Shopify theme. So you just go to Online Store, go to your active theme, and go to Edit Code. What I would like to do is to create a new snippet. So I will just go for Add New Snippet and name this one campaign.liquid. And this can stay empty for now because we will overwrite it anyway later on. And in my main product template, I will just go down here and include the campaign.liquid from here. So when I go into here now and just put test as content, when I reload my product page, you can see test is here. And in Baserow, we can just make a new table here and go to paste table data. And we will just have a campaign name, a campaign image, active and last modified. And just go for add table. And we need to make some small changes to the field types here. So for the active field, this should be a Boolean, and the last modified field should just be last modified. I put this to ISO and I also include the time. In n8n, we can just add a new workflow here. I've just prepared an empty one here. And as our first node, we need a webhook, and this needs to receive a post request because we want to receive data from Baserow in this case. And now I will just quickly make a campaign here. I forgot to change this one here because this of course needs to be a file. So I will just upload a file here and set this one to active. And now I head back to n8n and I just copy the webhook URL for the test. And here in Baserow, we can just go to webhooks, create webhook, name this one n8n. This also needs to be a post request. And on this one, I only want to receive certain events. So I just want to get notified on the webhook when rows are updated. And here you can see an example request. I would just make a small change here. So we listen for a test event in n8n and just set this one to not active. And as you can see, we have received data here. I will just pin this data here so we have an easier time building our workflow. The next node I will use is a set node. This one is basically to set some default values for our workflow. So we just add some fields, and the first one is the Shopify subdomain. This should be a string. And in my case, that's n8n Mautic demo. The second one is the theme ID from Shopify. That's the theme we want to write our custom liquid file to. So when we go to our Shopify admin, you can see here in the URL, you get the theme ID, and we can just paste this in here. And I also want the file name. I called this one campaign.liquid. And then I will have another one that is just named content. Let me just copy this in here. This is basically a simple example on how the liquid file could look. You can get as fancy as you want to. In my case, it's just a simple image tag. And this phrase here, the uppercase image, is something we replace later on in the workflow with the actual value of the media file that we uploaded to Shopify. We test this step. And as we can see down here, these values have been set. The next node will be an if node. First of all, we will throttle down the frequency of requests. Because when you are in Baserow and say you make some edits to your campaign and your campaign database is a bit more complex, the webhook in n8n will be called on each field you edit in here and just gives a lot of requests that are not really necessary in this case. So we will need to limit this down a little bit. The way I would like to do this is calculating the time between the last changes. So what we need to do is we can specify a number field and we say this one has to be greater than something. And for the first field, we put this to an expression. For the calculation, we will use a little bit of JavaScript. So we can take the datetime from ISO function and we can just pass in the incoming data here, for example. So we put the last modified here and you can see the evaluation is successful and this is converted to a datetime object in JavaScript. So just let me separate this a little bit because then it's a little bit easier to read. In order to calculate the difference between the two changes, we can just use the diff method. This method will calculate the difference between two timestamps. We call this on the first timestamp. For the second timestamp, we can just take the timestamp from the old item that is always provided by Baserow. So we take the last modified here. And of course, to have this calculation working, we need to convert this one also into a timestamp. So now you can see we get a value here and we can just convert this into an object. And you can see right now we get the milliseconds. That's not really useful. So we will just pass an extra argument to the diff function here. And we just say we want minutes. Now we can just reference the minutes field, so we just get our value here. And for my example, I have chosen to make 0.1 minutes between changes. You can just take whatever you like and what's best for your use case here. The second condition we want to check is if the campaign is active or not. So we choose a bool here and check for if a value is true. And here we can just scroll down and take the active field. And for the third condition, I want to check for an array and that it's not empty because there is no point executing this workflow when there is no image to the campaign. And here we can just pull in the campaign image array. And now we can test this step and we can see this will evaluate to the false branch. The reason why this evaluates to false is because in my pinned data set here, as you might remember, I have just unchecked the active field to trigger the test data. And in order to get the data through the if node on the true branch, we need to change the active field here. Go down here, set this one to true. And now we just execute these nodes again. And you can see this goes into the true branch now. For the false branch, we will just take the no operation node because we don't want to do anything if any of the conditions we just set fails. And on the true branch, we put a GraphQL node. And in order to use this node, we need to set up authentication for Shopify. So in this case, we take a header authentication. And here I have already saved my credentials, but I will just quickly show you how to set this up. So what we'll do now is we save this workflow and we go for credentials and go add credentials. And here we say just header auth, continue. For the name, we just need the X Shopify access token, and I will just quickly show you how to set this up. So you go for settings and apps and sales channels, and here you go for develop app, create an app. I will just name it n8n2 here. And here we can just define the scopes, because what we want to do is we want to read and write themes, and we also want to write files here. So that's good enough for this one. Now we can save this. And here for the API credentials, we need to hit install app. And now we get our token shown to us once. We can just copy this over and put this in here. I will just quickly delete this one here because I already have my header authentication set up. Now we can just head back to our workflow and open up the GraphQL node. And we will need an endpoint to call here. So we just head back to our Shopify and we go to start using the admin API. And here you will see the endpoint we need here. What I'd like to do here is I put this to an expression and inject our Shopify subdomain here. And here you can see this evaluates to the full URL. In order to upload a file, we need a file create mutation. And this can be found on the Shopify documentation. When you have a look here how the mutation is structured, you can see it expects an array from type file create input. This can be seen down here, that's in the variables part of the documentation. So when you go to schema, you see how the file create input is defined. And on the variables tab here, you see an example. So we have a JSON object that has a field files, and this has an array that can hold one or more files. So we can just copy this one over and get for the ID here. And in order to pass the variables to the mutation, we need to change the request format from GraphQL raw to JSON. And now we have the variables field down here. And we can just copy this one over and we put this to an expression because we want to inject our own data. So what we can do here is, for example, for the alt tag, we can just get the campaign name. The content type we make an image. This one we don't need for now. And for the file name, we go into the campaign image and get the visible name. And for the original source, we can just take the URL that was provided by Baserow. When I get back to my Shopify admin here, I can just go to content and files. And here you can see these are pretty much the standard files. We can just test the upload here and we test our step here. And you can see this has succeeded. And if we refresh here, you can see that this file has been uploaded. The last step of this workflow is to send an HTTP request to another endpoint. In this case, it's the REST admin API. This provides access to our theme. And when we go here, you can see there's a put request. So this is also our URL we need for the request. And just paste the endpoint here, and now we can just complete our full URL here. So what we can do here is we can go for the nodes, the edit fields and the parameters. And here we just get the right ones. So we have our subdomain, and this needs to be followed by .myshopify.com. And this needs an HTTPS. And here you can see there is the theme ID in the URL. So we inject our own one. That's this one here. And now we are good to go. And for the authentication, we take a generic credential type, the header authentication as before. And here we take the header authentication for Shopify again. What I forgot is to set the method here. We want to make a put request as stated in the Shopify documentation. And we want to send the body in JSON format. And put this one to using JSON. Now, when we head back to the documentation, you can see the JSON part that is sent in the curl example. And we can set this to an expression and use it for our own values here. So as you might remember, we had the edit fields here, and we already used the Shopify subdomain, we used the theme ID, and now we have the file name and the content for the template file. So for the file name, we have chosen campaign.liquid. So what we can do here now is we can go to the edit fields, and here we have our file name. And for the value, we take the contents of our content variable. So you can see down here, we still have the uppercase image I have mentioned in the start of the video. So what I would like to do now is to replace this with the actual file we just uploaded. So what we can do here is we can use the replace method and replace image with the actual value of our file name here. So we just take this one from the campaign image, and this is the visible name again. And you can see this evaluates to the file name. So we can just test our step. And this is expected because we are sending HTML content in a JSON object, and we need to make sure that the JSON formatting is correct. So we need to make some small changes here. So I will just divide this for a little bit better readability. So what we need to do is we make another replacement. So what this does is it basically replaces a backslash with a double backslash. As you can see, this didn't make any changes in my example, but when you have more complex templates, you will need to make this replacement. So we just have another one, and here you can see there is something happening here. So what we do here is we escape the quote here, so the quote will be replaced by backslash quote. And for the last one, we escape the new line character. In my example, we have a one-liner, but if you have a template that has a lot of code and you have formatted the code for better readability, it's good to have the new lines processed in here so you can keep your formatting. So now this is done, and we can test this again. And you can see the request was successfully submitted to Shopify. And when we head back to our admin and go to themes, edit code, this file has been created, but I can see this is in the wrong place really, because we had planned this as a snippet. So I will just get back here. So we'll just edit this one here, because you can see we left in templates from the Shopify documentation, and this needs to be in snippets. So we test this one again and hit refresh. And now you can see campaign.liquid has been created under snippets here. This is all working for now. And what I'd like to do is, of course, I save my workflow. And there's one thing we need to do. We need to get the production URL and go back to Baserow and edit our webhook here. And we need to call the URL of the workflow. And now we can just activate this one and get back to our store and make a preview. On our test, we uploaded this image here, and when we go to Baserow now and edit this one here, and when we upload another image here, and when we go to our executions, you will see that this has been executed and it has been evaluated to false and went to the no operations. And that's just because this one is not active. And now you can see this is all working. And when we refresh our page now, we have the other image here. And if we head back to our admin and go for content and files, you can see both images have been uploaded here. So that's it for this video. This is just a starting point for dynamically updating content on Shopify. Automations like this save a lot of time and help people to do more meaningful and more interesting work. If you have any questions or suggestions or anything, just drop a comment. Please also like and subscribe. Have fun trying it out. Thanks. Bye.